the motion?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Lindsay. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, if any? So motion carried, so ordered. Chair relinquishes the vice chairman back to the chairman, Mr. Henry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chrisman. I appreciate it. We will now return to the regular order of the agenda and go back to item number 4. And we are going to have a discussion with our actuary on the township's employee pension plans regarding a proposed change to the always exciting actuarial assumptions. Mr. Wolf.
Yes, board members, with us this evening is Colleen Deere. Colleen can come up to a table, a microphone. Colleen is with Mockenhop Benefits Associates. I forget what group. And she and Mockenhop have, Mockenhop Benefits Group has been the township's actuary for its pension plans for about 28 years. Colleen has provided to the board a request, and that request is based upon the actuarial valuation report, which was prepared for a date of 1/1/17. Basically, last year in January, a report was prepared by Mockenhop for both the police pension plan and the non-uniformed employee pension plan, stating basically the annual cost for the plan on an actuarial basis. Those reports were issued to the township in draft form in mid-year 2017, but Colleen also issued them with recommendations that prior to issuing them in final form, we should consider amending the actuarial assumptions. And the amendments that she will go over with you tonight are significant in that they will have dramatic effects on the cost of the plan, but they could also more accurately represent the future cost of the plan as we move forward. So, Colleen, that was a brief kind of poor summary. I'll let you do a better job of it.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me out here tonight. As the actuary, we prepare evaluation of the pension plans every 2 years, which is required by law. And as part of that review process, we always look at the assumptions that are used to calculate the plan liabilities. Pension plans in general are looking forward for many, many years into the future, not only, for the entire career of your employees, but beyond that, their lifetimes and how long they're going to collect the benefit. So we employ certain assumptions about the future, the most significant of which is the interest rate or the assumed rate of return on plan assets and future contributions, but also other things like salary increases between, when somebody's hired and when they retire, since their pay is what their pension is going to be based on, how long they're going to live after they retire, how many people are going to leave early, before they get to retirement age, what age they're going to retire at, because that affects, of course, how long they're going to collect a pension. So some assumptions we use are based on, more standardized tables or experience, or, since generally these plans are considered small relative to the overall, population. Other things are more tailored to these plans because of the specific benefits that are provided or the specific experience of your group that is relative and important in factoring into the assumptions. But as I said, the interest rate assumption is one of the biggest ones. That's the interest rate that we use to discount the future benefits into today's dollars and then formulate a plan for accumulating money to make sure that that is all there by the time people are expected to retire. Under state law, plans, these local government plans in Pennsylvania have to be, in effect, pre-funded. So the funding scheme is that you have to accumulate the assets between when somebody enters the plan and have them accumulated by the time they're expected to retire the full pot of money to be able to pay the benefits for the rest of their life. So our job is to make sure, you achieve that goal of getting that money there. And of course, the assumptions are part of that. And I always like to just point out, even though it seems obvious, that the true cost of the plan is really what dollars are going to be paid out at the end. It's just a matter of how do you accumulate the money, what assumptions you use to either put it in sooner or later or spread it out over time. And of course, things do change over the years and decades of a plan, and so sometimes things need to be tweaked. The actuary was recommending lowering the interest rate assumption for the 2017 valuation, which had previously been set at 7.25% per year. He was recommending lowering that to 6.75% starting in 2017. And of course, there are a little slightly different proposals for each plan, but we were recommending that change for both plans. For the non-uniform plan, we were proposing lowering the the salary scale assumption too. That's the average salary increases over an employee's career. Both of course, those assumptions have an underlying component of inflation. Most people's expectations of inflation are lowering. That kind of ties into the interest rate and salary assumption increase. So we were proposing on the non-uniform group to lower the salary increase assumption from 5.25% average per year to 4.75%. And another thing I like to point out about that, which is usually the first question that comes up, is 5.25% would seem crazy. We don't give 5% raises. We haven't given 5% raises for a long time. But the reason why the salary assumption would generally be something higher than the standard contractual or merit raises is because it does take into account other components over a person's career, such as changing their position or getting promotions and other components of pay that do go up over time on top of the base. But that being said, on the non-uniform plan, the averages even over the last 10 and 20 years have been less than what we were assuming, so we were proposing lowering that. But keeping the same was what we had been using for the police plan. The other proposal we were making, which is actually one that we've been making for pretty much all of our government plans, we work with about 400 municipal retirement plans across the state, is updating mortality assumption. There has been a new table published, and upon review, we decided to adopt that for use in our government plans. And surprisingly, that in some cases has even a little bit more of an impact than the interest rate, depending on how much of a change, because it's assuming people are going to be living a lot longer than they used to. Then other change, we were proposing two other changes on the police plan only. One is to update disability rates, which is just the probability over time of people becoming disabled and therefore going on a disability retirement, and the retirement assumption itself, how old people will be when they retire. We've been finding the experience of the police plan in particular is that people are staying a little bit beyond with the date they're eligible to retire. So by assuming people will stay on a little bit longer based on experience, that's going to offset a little bit some of the increase in cost for the interest rate assumption. So we did take a look at what the impact on the annual contribution requirement would be of those changes. Of course, the net effect will be an increase for both plans. And then once we had those proposals put together, we did add one set of what we call intermediate assumptions. Because the impact of that was pretty significant, we thought if the board was interested in sort of phasing things in, we had one sort of in-between proposal, and that would be instead of going a full 0.5% reduction in the interest rate, just going a 0.25% at this time, maybe doing another reduction in the future, or just monitoring things and seeing if that additional change is warranted, and a slight adjustment to the mortality rates that would make them not quite as big of an increase in costs as the full change would be. And does everybody have the impact numbers? Okay. So that's what we're showing in the tables that we had there. The first column, we're showing basically where the plan stood at the prior evaluation 2 years ago, January 1st, 2015. where it would be coming forward to January 1st, 2017 if we made no changes to the assumptions, and then what those numbers would look like under the recommended assumptions and the intermediate assumptions. And the bottom line kind of each of those columns is the estimated minimum municipal obligation, which we based on what the actual payroll was for the 2018 MMO. So the 2018 MMO won't change no matter what you decide on these. That's already set and put into the budget. I just showed that there for comparison. You would see the first impact of these changes upon completion of the report for the next MMO, which would be for 2019. Any questions?
I'm sort of curious as to why you're lowering the interest rate assumption, given that we're in a period of, the Fed increasing rates, and we've gone through 2 weeks of dramatic instability in the equity markets because of fear of rising interest rates. So with all signs pointing to that, why would we be lowering our assumption?
Well, a couple things. I guess one is that in general, the investment managers are still have a little bit lower outlook as far as their long-term capital assumptions going forward. And even the returns for this past year have not really impacted that. In fact, some of them are actually lowering their long-term capital interest rate assumptions. Also, even if you would factor in last year, so when we looked at the averages over the long term for the returns on these plans, for the police plan, for example, over the last 21 years, it was averaging about 6% per year. Last 10 years, about 4% per year. That was as of all the way through 1/1/17, which would go to the end of 16. But even if you did factor in last year's returns, which I don't know offhand what they were, right, and it's basically what most plans would get, it probably wouldn't still significantly change that. So we'd still be looking at a historical average that's less than what the current assumption is of 7.25. On the non-uniform plan, we had a 20-year average at 5.5% and 10 years at 4%. So just because of losses over a course of several evaluations on investment returns,
What sort of losses?
well, I don't have like all the valuations with me here to show that, but I could pull those out of the historical numbers.
That'd be interesting to know.
We did lower it once before. Actually, I don't remember if it was the last valuation or a couple ago. We were at 7.5% and lowered to 7.25.
Any questions?
Also, the portfolio for these plans is slightly more conservative than some other plans. So we do have plans that we're still recommending that 7.25% is okay, or 7%, but they have a little bit higher allocation of equity, so yours is a bit more conservative, which is good. But long term, a little bit lower. And what you mentioned about the interest rates too going up, that could have a sort of a short-term negative impact on bonds and so forth. So you still may see in the next 5 years or so less than expected returns on fixed.
Board members, we have a maximum plan exposure in funds, 60% in equities, 40% in bonds, and up to 10% can be in cash. Our investment policies are adhered to pretty strictly by our 3 fund managers for both pension plans. There has been pressure by fund managers to go to a higher percentage of equities, but it's been resisted by the pension committees, feeling that 60% is aggressive enough for our tastes.
So historically, we, I don't know, you say underperform, but our projection return and historic return is off by quite a bit. Is that normal?
Unfortunately, it is kind of normal right now. Just looking at that particular period, just because interest rates have been so low for so long, it's been hard to achieve that. I mean, if you look way further back, the these would not be unreasonable assumptions if you went back maybe 30 years or 40 years, looking at what stock returns were and so forth. But, and we don't like to tweak these dramatically, you know, just in response to current economic conditions or anything like that. But,
Well, I was on the school board, so I know, you know, the pension, the pension situation there is, this is a walk in the park compared to that. Municipal pensions, you know, but they all deal kind of with the same matrix, and it's,
yeah, the difference, at least on the local government side as compared to the school districts, which are of course, as you know, under the state system, is that these local government plans have been under minimum contribution mandates since 1984. So whether you maybe use assumptions that were slightly off or whatever, there was still a mechanism for getting a minimum contribution in based on some kind of cost formula. Whereas under the state system, they really did not go for many years under an actuarially required contribution minimum. They were just setting the numbers kind of by statute, I don't want to say randomly, but, you know, just
yeah.
based on actuarially determined amounts.
no, I guess it was based on the year-to-year stock market returns or investment returns, or,
Yeah, when things were good, as they always say, they took a contribution holiday, but they took it for too long, and then in the meantime also added more benefits, which added to the costs and didn't contribute more at the
Right.
same time, and then the stock market drop and all that stuff was just kind of the,
and I really am, you know, I feel a lot better with our pension here. It doesn't hang over everything that the township and municipalities across the state do, like the school and the public employees. It is, that dictates budgets, those folks. Now, the $460,000 increase, is that for both? Is
That was the
combined
total
for-
amount.
Huh?
Was it not, Colleen? That was the total between the two plans.
from the prior to the recommended assumptions of the police plan was about, under 300,000, and the non-uniform was, about 240.
What budget year would that be, this
If,
fiscal year or next year?
2019.
2019. And the 460 would be if we were to go with the whole plan increase at one time, but there's also sort of a middle range that would be less?
Right.
What would that amount? Do we, or is it a flexible number?
On the non-uniform plan, we had two scenarios. On the police plan, we had one interim scenario. And I don't have a calculator in front of me. I did do all the, the differentials. But, on the non-uniform plan, with going with all the recommended assumptions, we would be looking at an estimated MMO around 873,000. And on the police plan of, $1,451,000. Whatever that amounts to. And on the non-uniform plan interim assumptions, instead of the 873, we would be looking at either 791 or 754. If we only went to the 7% interest rate and made it, or made a tweak to the mortality assumption. The interim on the police plan would be going to 1,326,000 instead of 1,451,000.
and the bigger bite we take, I guess, at the apple, then down the road, the more we save, and then the more, the opposite, we smooth it out a little bit.
Well, we also have to keep in mind the impact on the budget next year as well, because $460,000 is a substantial increase. So good to know that we have some potential range of options there.
there is an issue though, and the issue is that Colleen needs to issue a final report and submit that to Auditor General
Yes.
by the end of March. So for her to do that, she needs to know what assumption you want to use.
Yeah, and under state law, the assumptions, of course, be recommended by the actuary, but they have to be agreeable to the governing body, which is why we want to present them to you and get your input.
Does that then lock us into actually following through with that if you put that in that report?
It would lock you in for this valuation, yeah. So that would lock you in for sure for the 2019 contributions. Will have to be based on these reports that we'd be preparing, possibly 2020, depending on if the next valuations for 19 got done before or after the final budget.
So if we went for the middle range as opposed to the upper range, but then when we do our budgeting in November and December, we decide that we can afford to go to the higher range, can we bump up?
Yeah, so.
We cannot, I assume we cannot bump down, but we could bump up if that were an affordable option at that point.
And so what sometimes a municipality would do, and I would recommend, is that, you know, if you didn't want to commit to the full change at this time, but you thought that might be, you know, the best direction to go, ultimately, you could just go with the interim, and then if you did have the money, put the extra in. That way you're not locked into that level, but if you have it, you can fund it at that level.
Can add
You
to
always
it.
put in more than the MMO. You
Okay.
just put in less.
But do we have a total price tag for the interim or no?
Increase,
Yeah,
But-
it'd be, 791,200 plus 1,325,700.
well, that's the total contribution.
That would be the total contribution between
Okay.
the two plans at the interim.
So,
But what is if the full amount is an increase of 460, what is the amount of the increase for the interim?
I'm not sure.
well, give me, I can,
The 460 is in.
I think that was from your correspondence, not from your table.
Yeah, here's where the, contained in the memo of Wednesday.
Colleen,
well,
board members, our minimum municipal obligation for 2018, what's in our budget for this year, is $1,860,307. So if $1,860,000, the interim that Colleen is recommending is roughly 2.1. Am I getting that right, Col? So it would be an increase of 350.
That's about 3/4.
350,000 as opposed to 460,000. It's a little bit of a help. My concern is committing to a $350,000 expenditure for next year before we even begin a budget process.
Is there another interim that you could provide, Colleen?
Those were all the ones that the actuary came up with whenever, you know, I presented the first round, basically. I mean, we could try to look at it again, but those were sort of the options that we had looked at now.
Any thoughts?
No, I just, Mr. Henry raised a question, and I assume when you lowered the interest rate, you also had to lower the salary increase to make them compatible.
Yeah, you don't have to, as I mentioned before, there is that underlying component of inflation, but, if, you know, we still would look at plan experience for both of those assumptions
Okay.
independently. The state law, though, does have a limit that you can't, exceed a spread between those two assumptions of 3%. So, you know, we're not anywhere near that, but there is that limitation.
Okay. Thank you.
So are we looking for any specific action tonight, George, or is this something we can take under consideration for a couple of weeks?
Colleen, what's your deadline?
I mean, I would say as long, if we had a decision even
The end of February? Yeah, that leaves us with one meeting.
Well, it does, you're also in here, that, well, actually, I was gonna say, we do have the fourth Tuesday, which is also an authority meeting, but you wouldn't be in attendance, so that wouldn't work.
Well, let us take it under advisement until next week, at least. That requires a little more thought. Unless anybody wants to do something differently.
Mr. Henry, I will have to recuse myself because my husband is part of the police pension after he vested when he left. so.
Okay. Okay, well, in view of the fact that Mr. Chrisman is not with us at the moment as well, why don't we hold this over to next week then, George?
Okay.
Any other questions for Colleen? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we now are going to move to item number 5 on the agenda, a status report from Raftalis Financial Consultants regarding the stormwater funding feasibility study. Another big ticket item here, so.
And Keith, you may wanna check, make sure your microphone's on.
Okay.
Just push.
Should I see a light?
Yeah, little green light.
No, it's dead.
And there, is that the reason why there's a container of batteries on the table?
That's a test.
Or for Eagle fans?
Hopefully there's batteries in it.
A half an hour?
The batteries?
That's all? Wow. Huh. I see why you have a container of batteries on the table. That's,
That'll lead to message discipline.
that's true. Talk quickly.
I didn't know that.
I'm afraid I flunked the
Well,
test.
that's okay, we can hear you. We're not.
Why, why don't you go to the
Up to the
podium?
microphone.
You
Come
can come to the
podium.
podium, that one is corded.
Yeah.
You're still going to be on TV up there at the podium.
Well, we have television, so.
Okay, can you hear
Yes.
me here?
Yeah, You
Yes.
probably need to
Yeah.
hit the little, is the light on?
No, it's just
No,
on the
no.
mic.
On the mic, is the green light on?
It is now.
All right, very good. Now all of Lower Paxton can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Keith Redling. I'm Executive Vice President and Director of Stormwater Management Consulting for Raftalis Financial Consultants. And I'm here this evening to provide a status report to the board on our funding feasibility study. And what I want to cover is our scope and where we are. Your current stormwater management program as it exists now in the township, what we believe the future program entails, what your alternatives might be for funding that expansion in services over time, and what the timeline is for our project going forward. And let's see.
I'm doing it.
Okay, then I'm not in charge of this. So the broad overview here is the township already spends over $2.5 million a year on stormwater management, and I've got a detailed accounting of that. It's going to go up, and we think up to about $3.5 million a year in the near term, and I have detail for that. To fund that gap, we're going to need to do something, which could be a tax bump, and it could be the adoption of a stormwater utility fee administered through the sewer authority. And I was here with my coworker Jennifer Fitz, whom I failed to introduce earlier, in December, providing some of this same detail, but we have new members on the board, and we've refined some of our numbers since then, and that's why we're back. So let's start with the current slate of services being provided by the township and their cost. It's right at 2.58 million with the largest single cost, drainage system operation and maintenance. We are living with a municipal separate storm sewer permit here in the township now. This is a permit issued that governs the discharge of stormwater runoff from the township into waters of the state and mandates that that non-point source discharge be as clean as possible, minimal pollutants. That program has been in place since the late 80s for some large cities, and it has increasingly regulated surface water pollution discharges. And it relates very closely to the sediment TMDL that we have here, and therefore some of your capital costs that relate to stormwater pollution really tie back to the same non-point source rules that came out of the amendments to the Clean Water Act in 1987. We also spend money on plan review and compliance. This is really an accounting of all of the costs incurred now by the township that could be allocable to stormwater management, and that's why leaf collection's in here. The leaf collection program prevents those same leaves from getting into the drainage system, which causes clogs, which causes problems with the discharge of water, and it also causes water pollution from the rotting of the leaves. So there are a lot of ways the township might imagine to fund leaf collection, and there was a discussion on the solid waste program earlier. That cost is allocable to stormwater should this body want it to be under the rules where you adopted a fee to pay for it. Street sweeping is the same exact situation. Street sweeping removes the particulates and the surface debris that would otherwise go into the storm drainage system. And so that's also a water pollution control program. So our existing program here, right at 2.58, and we worked with Mr. Wolf, Mr. Allen, Mr. Weaver in sewer, Mr. Klein, Ms. Zerby, to tease out all these costs, because stormwater generally, historically, no matter where you go, has not been a cost center in and of itself. So that's what we spend now. In the near term, we think it goes up by about $940,000 a year, with the most significant cost, these restoration projects that relate to the sediment TMDL and the municipal separate storm sewer permit that are coming through on the joint work with Susquehanna Township and Harrisburg. But we also have additional Paxton Creek TMDL cost, some data management and GIS cost, the need for a couple of drainage folks. And so all in, we think new cost coming on quickly and fully in place in a couple or 3 years, almost another $1 million. So the first part of our contract is about how much do we already spend on stormwater management and how much might we face soon. The second piece is, how would we fund this? And there are really only two ways to fund it in an ongoing way: tax funding and fee funding. And under tax funding, which is how it's funded now, we are allocating this cost, currently $2.6 million a year roughly, based on the taxable valuation of various things within the township. Consequently, tax-exempt properties are not contributing to that revenue requirement, but it's a straightforward program to administer. The other option is, for some or all of the cost, would be a stormwater fee. Stormwater fees have become very common in the U.S., and they're becoming more common in the Commonwealth. Stormwater fees are not based on tax value, they're based on characteristics of property. And they typically will assess the fee based on the amount of runoff that a property would generate during a rainfall event. And the amount of runoff that a property would generate has to do with how much hard surface area is on that property, rooftop and parking lot being the two main categories. So that's called impervious surface area. That allocates the cost, in your case, currently $2.6 million, trending toward 3.5. That would reallocate costs not based on tax value, but based on hard surface area. And it would include non-taxable properties just like other utilities do: water, wastewater, electricity, and gas, for example. So those are really our two choices. We're currently tax funded. We could remain tax funded for the current efforts, fee fund the increase. We could add to the tax funding with a tax bump and tax fund the entire future program. Or we could fee fund the entire future program and free up some tax dollars. The third thing we did was we said, well, were we to imagine a fee based on hard surface area, how much hard surface area is there in the township? Because very quickly the conversation becomes about money. Is how much would I pay under the two different scenarios? We have about 14,500 single-family properties. A little over half of all the impervious area in the township is on those properties. And we measured carefully the impervious surface area on about 200 of these in the township. And the typical is about 3,500 square feet of impervious area on single-family detached lots that have one home. The other 46% roughly of the impervious surface area in the township falls on the other properties, which I just call non-single family residential. And there are fewer than 4,000 of those parcels in the township. The majority of the parcels are single family. So quick recap, we already spend 2.6 a year. That represents about 0.8 mils of tax burden on the real estate taxes currently. And the average home with a tax value of $200,000 is paying about $160 a year to contribute its share toward the 2.6. So currently we tax fund, currently a typical home is paying about $160 a year in contribution. If we look at the $940,000 in new cost, that would take about a 0.3 mil bump. So if we imagine to increase taxes to cover the required increase, then we need to add about 0.3 mils. That would generate another $60 for an average home. That average home's already paying about $160 for their share of the 2.5. So their share of all-in cost moves to about $220 under all tax funding real estate taxes. So second alternative is, what if we keep tax funding what our current program is and fee fund the increase? And under that scenario on the next slide, fee funding that increase to get the $941,000 would require a fee of about $32 to $48 a year for a home, or $8 to $12 a quarter. And under a stormwater utility administered through the authority with a fee, that fee would be conveyed with the sewer bill quarterly. So it would be seen by a ratepayer as a quarterly line item on the sewer bill, which we estimate to be between $8 and $12 a quarter based on how many units of impervious area we measured. So under this second scenario, typical home continues to contribute about $160 a year in tax contribution toward our existing efforts and begins to pay $8 to $12 a quarter to cover the increase under a utility authority fee billed on the sewer bill. And our third option is to say, what if we fee fund the existing cost and the new and free up the 0.8 mils off the revenue, off the real estate taxes? Under that scenario, we would see the stormwater fee rise to somewhere around $150 a year or $30 to $40 a quarter. We say $118 to $174, and part of the challenge here is we're trying not to spend the money to measure every impervious thing in the township, but give this body enough information to make an informed choice to direct staff and your consultants, leaving us to measure things only if you choose to go that route, because it's kind of expensive to measure them. But I feel like it would be in the $30 to $40 a quarter to fee fund all existing and new, but the same homes would then see potentially a drop in tax burden if this body chose to reduce real estate taxes. Now, you could keep the taxes the same and use the 0.8 mils for other unmet needs. And that, in fact, is what the Borough of Carlisle intends to do. It's another jurisdiction we're working with right now. We're implementing a fee there now that would go live January 1st. They're going to fee fund their entire cost. They're not going to reduce taxes, and they're going to use the freed up real estate tax revenues to improve their street maintenance. So just to recap this, if you go all fee funding, $30 to $40 a quarter for a typical home would be what the fee would be to cover the 2.6 and the 0.9. And if you cut the taxes 0.8 mils, that same home would see their tax burden drop by about $160. You say, well, gosh, how could that be? Their fee is $150, their taxes drop $160 under that particular angle. The reason is the reallocation of cost that shifts burden away from residential when we switch to an impervious area basis. Because right now, tax exempts don't pay anything toward your revenue requirements, and commercial properties have more impervious surface but are taxed more lightly. So right now, a lot more than half of your tax base is residential, but only about half of your impervious area base is residential. So the shift in funding causes a shift in who pays what. So let's talk about timing for just a minute. We're finished doing our analysis, and we're preparing now to write a report to deliver to Mr. Wolf and staff for review, and we expect to do that in early March. And that report will include a recommendation from Raftellus on a path forward to grapple with the revenue requirements. And if I can jump to the last slide, if this is readable, you see calendar year 2018 across the top. Under a fee funding scenario chosen by the Board of Supervisors, if we wanted to have fee funding in place January 1st of 19, we need this body to direct staff to go forward for fee funding in April. Then between April and November, we would do all the detail, get final rates together, do some public outreach and communicate with ratepayers and citizens about how it would work, gather their feedback, use that feedback to customize the approach, and give this body a chance to ponder and ultimately vote on a fee along about budget voting time, such that the fee funding to be billed on the sewer bill could be, by the authority, could be in place in January of 19. If this body chose not to go fee, we just need the choice not to go fee in April, and then to fund the expected increase, a tax increase could happen during budget cycle as well. The one thing we didn't do under this phase of work is public outreach so far. We had originally imagined to do some. My recent experience in Carlisle suggests that we would really like to be able to say exactly what the rates would be before we have those meetings, because to have those meetings before you know exactly what the rate is to not have the answer to the first question you're asked. Now, I've been doing this full time for 25 years, but I'm still learning stuff. And so our sense would be that it would be wiser to spend the outreach money during an implementation phase if directed by this body. At this point, I think I'll stop talking and try to answer questions.
So the first fact is we have no choice.
You have no
To
choice
implement.
if you want to comply with the water quality rules that you're living with right now and not cut another part of the service, I believe. You have a choice on how to pay, but I believe the costs you face are unavoidable cost
Because of federal mandates.
because of federal mandates, with the exception of your drainage system operation and maintenance. Now, that's $1.5 million of your existing cost. So if you imagine you could cut that 940,000, then you could say, well, I'm not going up a penny. I don't think you can cut the drainage system O&M that much and not have problems with public safety for the traveling public. So my sense as an engineer is, no, you can't dodge the cost.
Okay, so we have no choice, practically speaking, but to do this. And there's going to be a substantial financial increase to at least every homeowner or resident in Lower Paxton Township. It strikes me that you sort of spread the pain out a little bit more if you do a fee. Now this would mean that any nonprofit, or what about other governmental entities like schools, et cetera, would they contribute at that point?
Typically they would, simply because a shift to utility funding would suggest you do it exactly like sewer. So if you can imagine who you're giving free sewer service to, the answer might be no one.
Yeah.
then that's who would get free stormwater service, probably no one.
It's important to note that the township itself would be paying a fee.
And one thing I didn't explain very well is I said the average residential lot has 3,500 square feet on it. And under one of the rate scenarios where we fund the 940,000 in new cost with a fee, $8 to $12 a quarter to do it. Let's call it $10 a quarter. That's 3,500 square feet on a residential lot for $10 a quarter. If we had a church with 35,000 square feet of impervious surface, or a business with 35,000, that's 10 times the 3,500. Their fee would be 10 times the residential fee. So it is very much different than taxes in that regard. And you're right, it shifts the burden and it spreads it out more. All developed property would pay something.
And we need to make a decision by April. Early April, end of April?
End of April is soon enough.
Okay.
If you directed to go fee, we have time if we know at the end of April. We estimate, and there is a second phase of work to be done by someone. Our estimate to do the second phase of work was about $55,000. So there's cost to be incurred to measure the impervious area, work with your solicitor on the ordinances that need to be adopted, get the rate work done, do the outreach, and get the stormwater charges connected to your billing system for the sewer system. That's what we would do between end of April and November, say.
Okay. Any questions? Robin, Chris?
Wow. I mean, we've had a lot
Wow.
of calls on the sewer rate. I mean, it just went up $5, so it makes you stop and think. John?
Yeah, there's a $5, the $5 increase as,
Wait, can I just jump, can I just
go ahead,
Can I
Chris.
just do a few? And hold on, I want to hear your question.
Whoop, careful, you okay?
I want to hear your questions. When you talk about, and forgive me if you answered these questions at prior meetings, when you talk about the 900 and some $1,000 increase, that's just for 2019
That's the average annual increase over
Beginning.
the 5 future years
over
we
the 5
modeled.
each year. Okay.
Yes.
And when we talk about the typical impervious area and what we think the cost would be, is that, and you said we probably don't want you guys going out and trying to measure so many properties and establish all these different, when you give the range, is that, what will the different fees be? Will there be one flat?
No, it's a good question. So first of all, our current effort includes an allocation of staff time to estimate how much impervious area there is in the township. And we did that. And we did that by tallying up how many single-family homes there are, which is a known thing. And we measured the impervious area on 200 to come up with an average and conflated that on the 14,500. And then we looked at a sample of non-residential properties, and we get kind of a grid cell analysis to come up with what I call the rate base. How many units of impervious area are there? Now, what your question was what would the range of charges be? So fairly common in stormwater fees is what's called a simplified residential rate. So I said the average residential property here has 3,500 square feet of impervious surface. Rate structure for stormwater would not be per square foot of impervious area. Just like for drinking water, it's not per gallon or per quart. It's a bigger unit, like 1,000 gallons or 100 cubic feet. And for stormwater, a fairly common rate structure would be one flat rate for single-family detached homes, or perhaps 3 flat rates for single-family detached homes, little, medium, and big. And we do enough analysis to divide all 14,500 into the 3 categories. And then for all the other property, carefully measure the impervious surface, which we don't do in the field. This is done with aerial photography and geographic information systems. And calculate how many multiples of 3,500 square feet of impervious surface are on these other properties. And then their charge would be whatever the rate is times that many units.
So the big ones will be actually measured.
That's all the big ones are measured completely. So for example, if you had, say, a super Walmart, and I don't know if you do or not, but I've done this a lot of times all over the place. A super Walmart that has the grocery and the regular Walmart, including their parking lot, they might have as much impervious area as 700 houses. And their bill would be 700 times whatever a house pays. So there would be some bigger ratepayers like the mall.
And I know for residential, and you said, you know, sewage-wise, we don't charge for usage. A lot of people would like us to. And I recall maybe at a previous meeting, you said the difference between the impervious area between residentials would not result, am I remembering correctly, would not represent too large of a range? I
Yeah,
guess
what
that's
we
reflected
normally-
in
the-
your estimates.
Rate making for stormwater, best practices are that properties that are substantially similar should be charged the same thing. So under the substantial similarity doctrine, we can look at the universe of residential properties in the township and decide whether they're all similar enough that one flat rate makes sense. And your body would make the final call on it. We do the data, and we present you with a frequency histogram and everything you need to know, or whether we should have more than one flat rate because, for example, in Carlisle Borough, there are a lot of row homes. So the row homes are going to have small impervious surface compared to a sprawling 4-bedroom ranch over beside Dickinson College. We decided today we're going to have 3 flat rates, we think. So there are places where I work where the housing stock is pretty homogeneous, and one flat rate is enough. So what's right for you is what's right for you. It's not always the same.
And not to get too far ahead, but if we end up doing a fee and we put it on, you know, your authority bill, is there actual regulation to how you describe it and what, you know, how, because I know, and we're going to go through a outreach process, and we're going to communicate, and we're going to seek input, and there's still going to be a large percentage of the residents who, when they first get the bill, might say, what is this? And is there a limit or a regulation to how you can actually describe this for the people?
Well, there are limitations on what you can use the revenue for. So much like a wastewater utility or electric or gas utility,
Right.
drinking water.
No, I'm talking about the actual language on the bill.
What
how
would
you-
it say
how you
on the bill?
describe it.
How would it be described?
Stormwater utility fee.
That was
administered under
exactly
the
what it would
authority.
say on the sewer bill. So you'd get your regular sewer bill as one line item, then it would say stormwater utility fee as a separate line item, and then you'd have a total that you would.
That's right. And it could just show the dollar amount, or it could say one equivalent residential unit of impervious area at $8 a quarter equals $8.
We could add as much or as little detail as we want.
You could.
Okay.
There's no particular, I don't believe we're forced into one particular course of action on that.
Yeah.
We'd obviously collaborate with your solicitor on that too.
But in terms of if the additional costs were covered by property taxes, it would not be defined as a breakout. It just would have to be a increase in millage. So individual homeowners' property taxes will go up without explanation then?
Correct.
Other than what we're able to communicate through other sources?
That's correct. And so that effort would be unregulated and would not be on the sewer bill.
Robin,
Do you
did you?
recommend that we look at just new costs or total costs?
I recommend that you look at total cost. And the reason is that I believe that, and the chairman said it pretty well earlier, the thing that is causing you to spend this money is water runoff.
Right.
And water runoff, it does not relate to tax value, it relates to hard surface area. So in my heart as an engineer, it's a more fair allocation of the cost to allocate it based on hard surface area than it is tax value. And that goes for what you're already spending, not just for the new. Then the next thing I would say is, are these rates tolerable? Because they have to be tolerable. And so, for example, I've worked in New Orleans for years. Well, they need so much money. They need tax money, fee money, and money from they have to have their hand in every bucket to get anywhere near enough money. So fees might seem the most fair, and I think they are, but given what they require for revenue, they just have to get it every way they can get it. So that's a choice to be made by this body, but from a fairness and a revenue stability point of view, the impervious surface fee is superior.
Well, I raise the question because, I'm concerned with the taxpayer, and probably one of the biggest questions that we get on an annual basis is, you're not going to raise taxes on us, are you? Well, as things develop, we're going to have to do something in order to cover the costs. And I'm just thinking, if nobody likes a tax increase, nobody likes, infringement on your standard of living, et cetera. But if I had to make a decision, I would probably opt for an annual fee because it gives me a longer period of time to save for it, so to speak. Because our sewer bill, man, when you get that sort of jolts you. And that's going to be going up.
That's
Well,
what
I can
said,
remember-
just the $5, people were, and if you hit them with $32 to $44,
Well, when the property tax bill comes in and it goes up by $100 and some, that's going to create, let's put it this way, this is going to be a financial jolt to the public, no matter which direction.
Right.
Because it is a significant amount of money. So whether it's a fee or a tax hike, we're all going to be digging a lot deeper because of what the federal government has mandated and is not paying for.
Well, in the communities in the Commonwealth that have evaluated the fact that their stormwater expenditures were already significant and forecasted to go up fast, who said, I'm going to have to do something besides just raising taxes again, started with the Philadelphia Water Department 20 years ago, but quickly moved into the reality of everybody else to where now Mount Lebanon, Radnor, Meadville, Carlisle working on a fee to go in January. Hampton Township has a fee. Dauphin Township has a fee. Derry Township has a fee. Jonestown Borough has a fee. I can remember when the only stormwater fee in Pennsylvania was Philly Water Department, and I was working with them when I had hair and was thin. So this thing has evolved and evolved, and it's evolved under Democrats and Republicans in the White House. The water quality has just become a bigger and bigger cost for all jurisdictions.
Okay.
I just
Why don't
had-
we, oh, go ahead, Robin.
I just had one question. You have in here new stormwater personnel. So if we would put it under the sewer, Mr. Wolf, would we still need to hire 2 personnel if that automatically went on the bill?
Yes, there's still additional work that has to be done. It doesn't matter where you fund it,
Okay.
you still have work.
And then the other question is, if you do a fee, then everybody pays for it. The schools, the churches, everybody pays.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because homeowners are, anybody who pays property tax pretty fed up with property taxes already. I mean, that's why it's such a big issue for state government. And, at some point, homeowners can only afford it. Although if you own the home, you're going to pay, if you don't pay the additional property tax, you're going to pay a higher fee on your sewer bill, but it gets spread out over more. John, did you have a question?
Let me get out of your way here.
Stay nearby.
Don't go far.
Nope, I'll stay close.
We got plenty of buckets in this town too. John Trier, 600 Prince Street. My first question is, I think for the past 10 years, we've been spending millions of dollars every year to fix the water infrastructure into it. When's the last time our stormwater's been measured to determine that we're putting this much stormwater into the system that we're going up 1/3?
Is that a question for me?
Well, you're referring to the fact that we've had the infiltration and inflow issue, but that program, John, is to keep stormwater from going into the sanitary sewer system.
I understand that.
So it doesn't really affect runoff because the goal is to not have the rainwater go into the sanitary sewer system, but one way or another, the runoff has to be dealt with.
I understand that. And they said the main problem, this was like 10, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They said our main problem was that our clay pipes were cracking and residential groundwater from my property and everybody else's was going into the pipe, and they were measuring that, and they were charging us, if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, but they were measuring that, and that's why we're spending.
You're not wrong. However, there's a new main problem now.
Well, then somebody ought to describe that problem to us, because it's going up 1/3, and you're going to increase another tax. You just increased the sewer tax. The water bill goes up. Pretty soon the trash bill's going up. Every bill is going up. And now from hindsight, from what I hear Mr. Henry saying, it sounds like our taxes are going to go up $100 this year or next year.
No, don't. No, decisions have been made. Do not
I'm just
assume
listening to what I'm
that.
hearing what I'm listening to.
No,
It seems like,
that is an option. That is not a decision.
well, it seems like we had a stray cat running through the township, and somebody put it in our yard. And now that it's in our yard, we got to pay for it. And we've been paying for it. And now we want to pay 1/3 more? And we're not, for me, I'm not getting a legitimate explanation of where is all these monies going to? Where is there just some water guy saying, hey, give me the money?
I was going to say, Mr. Wolf, I think, wanted to explain to
Okay,
you.
Well, listen,
the problem we're talking.
I'm not satisfied with the fee, and if you fee, it should be a moderate home, a medium home, and a large home. Don't charge everybody the same thing. I get rid of I got one pipe that goes into the street, and that's because all the water from the entire neighborhood comes to my house.
Well, John, first of all, the fee hasn't been established yet. So how that fee will be established is phase 2. But the problem we're talking about is not sanitary sewer. The problem now is a new problem for municipalities in Pennsylvania, Maryland, anybody that drains into the Chesapeake Bay. Water quality standards, the streams that flow into the Susquehanna and ultimately into the Chesapeake are polluted. And the Environmental Protection Agency is mandating that the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection hold municipalities accountable.
Based on the amount of water we send them, right? No?
No, it's not based upon the amount of water, it's based upon what's in the water. And what they have said is that there is too much sediment in the water, and we have to remove, in Paxton Creek, 35% of the sediment, 10% over the next 5 years. And they've said township-wide, for the Chesapeake Bay, we have to remove 10% of the sediment over the life of our Chesapeake Bay restoration plan. Each municipality has to develop its own plan and has to reduce sediment accordingly. It's a state requirement.
Okay, then one last simple question. The money that we've been spending, have we improved it? Have we made any improvements with this?
Okay, this is John, it's a very hard answer because, first of all, the township has not had the ability to determine if it's contributing, let alone if we are improving. And the 35% reduction is made by EPA and DEP, and it's based upon a theoretical model. It's not based upon actual standards or
It's not
sampling,
based upon evidence, it's based upon somebody's theory.
but it's a legal requirement.
And I think
This
I think you had said that you were mixing in the money that was spent to fix the sewage lines. And you basically, I think you want to know, we've been spending all this money in the past. What do we have to show that there's been improvements before we spend all this money going forward for more projects?
I was under the assumption that they were measuring the water rates coming from Lower Paxton, going into Wildwood Lake, and raising the levels with this sediment, and that's why we were paying all this money.
No, no,
Well-
no. That the money, the increases that we have sustained in our quarterly sewer bills has been going to improve the sanitary sewer system and to
No,
decrease the
I'm not
amount
talking about that money. I'm talking about the $1 and $2 and $3 million projects where we repaired all the sewer lines.
Right,
So that the groundwater doesn't go into it.
No, but-
Because they were measuring it in Harrisburg.
No. That was to prevent the groundwater from infiltrating into the sanitary sewer system and going into sewage treatment plants, not into Wildwood or any other place. The problem is, as Mr. Wolf has said, this is completely separate from the sanitary sewer project, and it is a relatively speaking new mandate
You might
that a
wanna
bunch of
advertise it.
bureaucrats in Washington have placed upon all of us.
Well, you might.
So, and I might add, without going too far in the weeds, I don't believe that this way of remediating the problem is the most effective way of remediating the problem, but that's a whole other issue. Do we have any other public comment? We have 5 or 6 other items on the agenda. I would sort of like to move us along, if not. Okay, so we have until the end of April.
And Keith, you will be providing us with a final Phase 1 report.
That's correct. We will make a report to staff in early March. We'll make sure staff's comments are addressed, and then this body should see it late March. It gives you about a month to decide how you'd like to proceed.
Okay. So let's see, you want 941,000. The last speaker wanted 460,000. This is turning into an expensive evening for us here.
And it sounds like you're not done yet.
Yeah, no, we aren't done yet. Although some of the other things might actually result in revenue as opposed to expenditure, so I'm anxious to get to that. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with that, we will move to the next item on the agenda, item 6, presentation of a proposed zoning ordinance amendment, or a number of zoning ordinance amendments, to accommodate an age-restricted housing plan. We're talking about a 149-acre tract on the east side of Colonial Road and north of Earl Drive by Traditions of America. Mr. Biddison?
Yes, thank
Welcome.
you very much. I'm David Biddison. I'm a partner with Traditions of America. The chair stole my thunder. I was going to comment that the board's spent the last hour and a half dealing with some really difficult cost issues, and I'm here tonight to talk about new revenue. About a month ago, my partner Tim McCarthy gave a pretty lengthy presentation related to the financial benefits of age-restricted Traditions of America community, the local township need, and also we went through the specific aspects of the site of the Pearl property. I had the opportunity to speak with the township manager and have a follow-up after that meeting, and in the interim since the last meeting, we drafted a revised active adult ordinance and submitted it to the township manager and to the township solicitor. We're here tonight, and I believe everyone has copies. If they don't, we can hand out copies, to discuss that ordinance and to request that it be moved forward to the county and to the Planning Commission, and ultimately a public hearing to allow us to move forward with the Traditions of America community. With that, we have our attorney here, our engineers, and are able to answer any questions.
And by way of correction, it's south of Earl Drive, not north of Earl Drive, correct? Okay.
Right.
Do we have any,
I guess the only thing I'd been thinking of since the presentation and sounded really good is, and I was struck by the cost that, that these places are gonna cost.
Thanks, Chris.
That's your business.
aren't you buying two?
Do you, when you establish this, I imagine you must know what your market is, obviously. Do you, how wide a net did you cast? Do you anticipate on bringing, how much of this is going to be township residents and how much of this you anticipate coming in from outside the township?
Well, let me first deal with the price point comment. When Mr. McCarthy was presented that question, we're in our initial stages. We're going to do a very in-depth market analysis when we ultimately come to market with the product. And that'll be all based on local price points and making it affordable for the individuals within the local market to be able to transition to community, because that's critical to our success. So the exact price point, we don't know right at this moment, and we'll follow through on that. In central Pennsylvania, we see, and it varies across the state, it's probably 75% of the people are coming within a 5 to 10 mile radius of the site and moving. Then you might get 10 to 25% that may be relocations, but oftentimes those are people who maybe lived in the area and are coming back, or they're relocating because of family. Their kids live in the area. But a good rule of thumb is, 70 to 80% of the people are local, and we underwrite all the jobs to have 100% of the people come locally. We can't rely on out-of-market people. We're not a vacation developer.
Could you, for the folks at home, give us like the 30-second elevator speech on what are the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest issue with the prior ordinance was that it only provided a slight density bonus for 55-plus communities and didn't contemplate any of the design requirements that make for a successful 55-plus community. So, for instance, we created all of the design requirements related to how far away the homes are from each other, all of the setbacks. We also required amenities to be built with any community. And the other big highlight is we added a provision in the ordinance that the size of the acreage would need to be a minimum of 80 acres to build this type of community, to ensure that it's going to have the right size amenities and the right size community to be successful. You don't want to have a bunch of 10-home, 55-plus communities popping up around the township. You want to have a large-scale, traditions-like community with those first-class amenities that are able to help have a sustainable maintenance program for all the residents as well, for all the landscaping and snow removal. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Board members, do we have questions?
Yeah, I would like, if we're working on our 10-year comprehensive plan, and board, I would like if Charlie Schmiel, our consultant, would take a look at this also.
Good point. Mr. Hawk, do you have any?
No, I was just going back to Mr. Judd's comments and thinking about the overall cost of, becoming a member of that community. My wife has always applauded my financial capabilities with our household, but she said, you better be on the idle rich side to afford this place. So that's my concern.
So is that your wife's polite way of saying you're cheap, or what is Mr. Judd, do you have any other questions? Does anybody from the public have any questions or wish to make any comment? Mr. Wolf, is there anything you would like to add?
Board members, no, this would, Mrs. Lindsay makes a good suggestion. We can certainly send this to Mr. Schmiel. At the same time, you could proceed to advertise. The risk you have is if the consultant makes a recommendation, then we start over. I would say that Mr. Schmiel typically would take 2, maybe 3 weeks to get a written report back to the board before we begin the process. I would wait until we have this review done, if that's what the board so chooses. If the board does, I can easily email the amendment to Charlie tomorrow.
Sounds like a good idea.
I think that's the prudent course of action. We're used to dealing with consultants, land planning consultants, and happy to talk with Charlie and get any feedback. Our attorney says he's worked with him on a number of occasions and is familiar with them. So I think it's prudent to then wait to advertise and send the necessary ordinances out once the planner has made their comments.
Very good.
Great. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update.
Thank you, George.
And now we would like to have a discussion with the Parks and Recreation Board, which I see is here. And we want to review the board's roles, goals, and expectations. So, welcome, gentlemen. Please
Self-sufficient.
give us your names and addresses for the record, and we'll be ready to roll.
Good evening. I'm Stan Smith, live on Constitution Avenue, walking distance from here. On behalf of the Park Recreation Board, let me start by first expressing appreciation to the board for the opportunity you give us to serve. Many of us, we were talking tonight, some have been on the board 10 or 15 years. And it's a great privilege, and we appreciate the fact that we are appointed by you.
Well, we thank you for volunteering.
Well, thank you. Well, the part of what triggered our request for discussion tonight was that this is the first time that we've had the opportunity as a board since we have some new members of the Board of Supervisors.
Yep.
And so congratulations to
Thank you.
Mr. Henry, Mr. Judd, and we appreciate your service and look forward to working with you.
Same
We
here.
believe that our role is to provide advice and counsel to the Board of Supervisors. We do that in 3 ways. One is we work with Terry and the staff to process concerns, questions they have. Secondly, we work with the community who will come to our meetings, raise concerns, questions, ideas, suggestions. We filter that. And then thirdly, we receive things directly from the board. And so we just want to affirm that we've had a good pattern of doing that together and look forward to continue that trajectory with the new generation of folks to work with. Now, Jim Seidler is the vice chairman of our board, and he just wants to highlight a few of the things that we've done together with the board over the last several years.
Great.
Welcome, new supervisors. Appreciate what you guys have done and that you're serving. Yes, I'm Jim Seidler, vice chair, and I live 1801 Blue Mountain Parkway, just north of Lingelstown there. And as Stan said, we've been working with the board for many years, and I just wanted to kind of give you an overview of some of the things that we've been doing in the past few years. We were a big participant in the Wolfersburg development of the Wolfersburger Park, or track, one of the biggest additions to our park acreage here in recent years, 93 acres. And that was a large project that we worked with, helping with the engineers and the community to plan that park. And also the planning of the Heroes Grove, input with the Heroes Grove development of that addition to amphitheater to our park system. We also assisted in the relaunch of the Colonial Park Community Club, which was acquiring use of the Mateer baseball field. I'll just read through a small list here. We also helped in restructuring the Hodges Heights Park. That was a controversial issue. And we worked to update the park and recreation ordinances. That was one of the most recent things that we worked with, include user fees and naming rights, among other issues. And we had to collaborate with the Friendship Board in order to achieve that as well. And we continue to provide, as council, we elect to interview and provide recommendations for candidates to serve in the various boards that we're associated with, primarily the Arts Council, our own board, and the Greenway committees. So that's just a brief summary. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to help. And Neil, as our chairman, he'd like to make a few comments.
Good evening, Board. Neil Johnson, Chairman, 5415 New Side Road. Hi, old faces, old friends. I'm just going to wrap it up by not only saying thank you for allowing us to be here to speak with you tonight, but also to invite you out to one of our board meetings. We meet the first Wednesday of every month, 7:15, right down the road here at the Friendship Center. And as you've heard here briefly, we cover a lot of interesting items on our agenda, and sometimes not so interesting, but such as township life. But really thanks to Terry and our Parks and Rec staff and all the great work that they do, combined with the community input that we get, we're able to provide, I believe, the best input and recommendations and advice for this board, and also feedback to Terry and the Parks and Rec staff. So with that, just want to say thank you. Do we have any comments or questions from the board? We'd love to answer them.
I would just, is there, what do you need? Is there anything you need that would make your job easier? Or is there, are you comfortable with your role and the board's role?
I think so.
in
I think
all
I can
this?
speak for the rest of the board. I think we're pretty well off. Like I said, Terry and the Parks and Rec Board, our department, provide us with the best information. Anything we need, they can provide for us. Every meeting, they're prepared. She's prepared to provide us all the information that we need on our agenda. They do a great job. At this point, I would say no, but I will turn it over to. Sure.
That's a great question, and thank you. We certainly understand that we serve at the discretion of this board. We are an advisory board to you. To do that, it's helpful if we can kind of be in the discussions that relate to Parks and Recreation. So probably the most disconcerting thing is to read about decisions that impact kind of our role that we did not get to participate in. That's not been like a big issue, but you were asking kind of a theoretical
Right.
question, and so that's more of a theoretical response. For us to provide the best counsel, because we deal with this on an ongoing basis, it's helpful if we can kind of at least be in the discussion. So the things that related to parks and recreation in the township, we have some participation in. And again, we're recommending to you, we're not making the decision.
And you feel that traditionally you have been?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Great.
No, I just had a question. I know we made appointments in the beginning of the year. Are you totally filled on your committee now? Do you have, nope, there's still a vacancy. Mr. Wolf shaking his,
We have one applicant.
Yeah,
okay, so we have one opening?
We
and-
interviewed a potential recommendation to send to you
Okay,
tonight, in fact.
No,
so he
good.
must be sitting in the audience out there?
Maybe.
He
might be,
Yeah, he's anonymous right now.
So once that's filled, then your committee's totally filled then? Okay, good. Because that's our goal, is to make sure that as many volunteers that want to volunteer, that they're put on the committees and it's filled then, so, great. Thank you so much for coming, I appreciate it, and Terry, you're doing a wonderful job, we really appreciate it, so, yeah,
Yes, yes.
good.
Well,
Thank you, guys.
one of the great things about Lower Paxton Township, and that really adds to the quality of life, is our park system. And I know we have one of the largest municipal park systems in the Commonwealth. And it's just a pleasure that we have so many places where families can go and where we can have community events. Having the amphitheater over at Heroes Grove is adding to that. We're adding to the park system. I know it's a lot of hours on behalf of all of you, but thank you for that. And certainly, we do look forward to having you involved integrally in everything that we go forward with here. But thank you. You've done a great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And speaking of that great job, this is a good segue, Terry. The next item on the agenda has to do with a proposed sidewalk project, and this discussion with the Greenway Committee. regarding a sidewalk that would go from Paxtonia Elementary School down to George Park. There at the moment is a gap in the sidewalking in that area, and it would appear that you've come up with some creative financing operation.
A lot of community support.
A lot of community support.
Financially and otherwise. And I was just going to let Mr. Scott Udit, who is the one who submitted the proposal to the township, he is the Building and Grounds Director of Central Dauphin School District, and he'll kind of give a general introduction on this, and then Jim, as the Greenway Chair, the Greenway Committee this has been a high priority project of theirs for a number of years. I've kind of come in at the tail end of it, but I'm thrilled that we might be coming to some closure on it. So with that, I'll turn it over to Scott, and I'll be available if you have questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Board, pleasure to speak with you tonight. Yeah, this dovetails perfectly with the previous presentation, enhancement to Parks and Recreation. We are hoping to add approximately 550 lineal feet of concrete sidewalk along Nye Road. It's in the township's right-of-way. The project would have a total cost of just under $50,000. We feel it's an important safety and enhancement project. It would add sidewalk on Central Dauphin School District property in Paxtonia and would connect Jonestown Road, Paxtonia Elementary School, the ballparks, and George Park. And Chairman, as you alluded to, right now there is a gap in that sidewalk, and we're hoping, obviously, to have an opportunity to fill that gap. Ms. Batdorf, who's in the audience tonight, the principal of Paxtonia Elementary School, approached me back in April of 2017, asking for assistance in determining feasibility and cost for the project. At that point, we brought in parents. We know, obviously, in terms of current practice, we have parents, students, visitors walking in the roadway, walking in the grass along Nye Road. It really is a bit of a safety issue and an inconvenience for those folks. So we've met several times over the course of the last 11 months. We've solicited input and assistance from the school, the PTO, myself, our Director of Maintenance, our Director of Safety and Security, Terry, and Parks and Rec. We've engaged Brian Evans from Evans Engineering to assist us with the survey, the plans for the sidewalk, and the permitting. At this point, we're happy to report that we've secured donations currently from Orange for Owen, which is a fundraising or group of parents of an 8-year-old, Owen Brzezinski, who was tragically killed as a pedestrian back in March 17th of 2011. Pensy Supply is willing to donate materials for the sidewalk. We have a contribution from the Paxtonia Athletic Association, and appreciate the support of the Greenbelt Association and the Greenway Committee with Jim. So at this point, the school district is asking the township to support a portion of the financial cost of the project in the amount of $17,882. The school district has already agreed to finance $19,000 as part of the project. We would oversee the project. We have a current contractor selected for the project, and are really just trying to find the missing pieces of the financing to see the project be undertaken. The goal right now would be to start the project sometime in the spring, so we would hope if the board would support the project, we would like to start the project sometime in April or May. We understand the permit for the job has already been approved. The road occupancy permit has already been deemed unnecessary. So the path has been cleared for this. We feel like we've got the cost driven down about as low as we can. We are still efforting to try and raise additional funds to try and offset some of the costs. But that's why I'm here tonight, to ask for your assistance for this project.
And the total cost you're asking for from the township would be?
$17,882.
It's very precise. I live nearby, and I have observed what you have discussed here tonight. A lot of times pedestrians walking along Nye Road, where various efforts have been undertaken by the township, from passports to slow down traffic and make it safer, but people walking, even pushing baby buggies in that missing section. So it really is a public safety issue. Board members, do we have any particular comments, Mr. Hawkins?
Well, no, I support the project, and I'm gratified that Pensy Supply is donating the material, and you're doing a lot of the legwork. The only thing is, I always very cognizant of is what I refer to as unfunded mandates. This comes outside the purview of our budget. So that becomes an unfunded mandates, and we certainly get enough of them from the federal government and the state government. In fact, I could bore you for the rest of the night with unfunded mandates, but
I live in that
generally-
world too, unfortunately.
Generally, I support the project. I think, and Mr. Henry made a great point, I hate to see kids walking along Nye Road if they can find an easier way to get to George Park.
And it's understood the township's not in the business of putting in sidewalk. I will tell you, the school district's not in the business of putting in sidewalk either. We're hoping to collaborate on this project. I know it sounds like it's been discussed for many years. I think the need has been identified. We feel with the collaboration we have, the donations we have, the timing is right to undertake the project now, and we're hoping for that support.
And this is something that I do think we're going to have to look at in a more organized way going forward. The fact there are numerous examples of areas in the township where we have these sidewalk gaps, because there was a time when sidewalking wasn't required.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we've moved into the modern era where they are. So gaps have developed, and it does become pedestrian issues. So certainly we've seen tonight we have a lot of funding demands on us, but it is something we're going to have to take a more organized look at, or perhaps the next speaker is going to tell us we already are.
I'd just like to add a little bit of history, and I know Mr. Wolf is familiar with the gaming funds we put in our application. He spearheaded that. I brought this project up a couple of years ago, and we have applied for gaming grants twice. I think we moved up the priority list a little bit, but we were unsuccessful there. And when I worked with the township originally, or the Central Dalton School District originally for this project, they just were not willing to provide any funding at all. And they have a new buildings and grounds person now, Mr. Rudin, and he went to great lengths to really support this project, and I just been very grateful. And so I'm just, it's pretty unprecedented the amount of support that we've gotten compared to in the past, and we've also managed to reduce the cost significantly with the stormwater management, as you mentioned. It's less than 1,000 feet. And the cost originally, I don't know if you remember, Mr. Wolf, it was over $50,000.
Yes, it was.
And now we've reduced it to 37, and then with additional, he didn't mention all the funding that they've got, other funding sources they've gotten, and they've gotten that cost down to, 17,000. So I just wanted to fill in a little history there to emphasize, where we are at this point as opposed to where we started. Thank you.
There certainly is significant community buy-in. There's no doubt. Robin, were you
Yeah, I have a
wanting to?
couple of questions. I was just kind of doing the math here. How much is Paxtonia Athletic Association giving?
$500.
Yeah.
500, okay. So I was doing the math here, so your total is 37,882. So you're asking us for 17,882, but you're saying the school district's putting in 19,000. My packet says 14, but we'll take the 19. So the total comes to 36,882 just with those two. That does not include the 6,500. So you're at about 43,000 right now. So I was just curious. It says 37 something, and I'm about a little over 43,000. So what is the extra money going to be used for?
The district's portion, the 19,000, is the $14,000 that we have earmarked for the project right now, plus the 5,000 that we've already paid for the engineering study, the survey, and the permit. So the 19,000 includes the
Okay,
14,000
so it's
that we
just gonna be
committed, and-
14,000 going for,
Going forward.
okay.
And the gap, if you will, I think the largest chunk of that is the donation from Pensy Supply for the materials.
Okay.
We estimate the materials to be about $10,000.
Okay, I was just trying to do the numbers,
Yep.
because my packet says 14, and then you said 19. Now, my question is, if there's an overrun, who's gonna, if that needs more money, who's gonna take care
The
of that?
district, either that or we're gonna obviously try and raise the funds to
Okay.
cover any over.
So it's going to extend from the Jonestown Road area down to the end of the ball field?
Right now, we have sidewalk that extends around the corner
Right.
of the school on Jonestown onto Nine,
Right,
and it ends at the end of our playground.
right.
So it would connect that sidewalk with new access ramp, new sidewalk, 550 lineal feet. Again, ramps as needed for the walkways along that stretch. And then obviously we'd have a ramp that would connect to the current sidewalk that exits George Park there on Nyes Road.
So it's going to go down to the parking lot, and then it's going to go across a little bit into George Park?
Well, we would have to, I think the plan right now calls for us to replace a section of that sidewalk, to replace the handicap accessible or ADA ramp on that sidewalk. So it wouldn't be replacing any of the existing with the exception of that ramp.
Okay. So it will, okay. Did you guys, I can't remember, do they park there by the ball field sometimes, like behind the fence? Is there, because you,
Not in the grass. They'll park
Okay.
typically on our property by our maintenance garage there behind Paxtonia. So you've got the school, you've got the ball fields. Our maintenance garage is
and
located
then they park there? So
there.
they will not be allowed to be parking on the grass there by the ball field?
That's
Because we
correct.
don't want them going over the
Curbing would
sidewalk?
still be installed along Nyes Road. Yep.
Okay.
Well, that's, hi, Scott.
Good to see you again, Chris.
As a veteran of many a Daddy and Donuts, I mean, that has always been the kind of the arduous journey, is the trek from the Paxtonia ball field parking lot up, either up the grass or along the street. And this is obviously and I imagine that's really, you're thinking about occasions like that for this? Because we don't really have a lot of traffic going from the school to the park itself, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
You're mainly talking about this.
I
'cause
think there's enhancement there both for the school, for the township, for Paxtonia Athletic Association, and for people and residents who want to access the park from Jonestown Road. But specifically for overflow, obviously we're not talking about adding any parking or anything down along Nyes Road, but if you had to have an event at the school, overflow parking, potentially in George Park.
Well,
now
there's
we've got-
limited parking up
Yep,
there, I
now
can
we've
tell you
got
that.
an opportunity anyway where you've got a safe pedestrian access to get to the school.
Well, and I guess the other thing we have to think about, and Mr. Henry had mentioned that we have other sidewalk issues, and I know a lot of the schools do. Are you envisioning, is this something now, or will this raise the question where other schools will say, hey, we have some sidewalk gaps too?
I've already had it for Swatara Township. I haven't heard any additional schools in Lower Paxton, but I know we're looking at another sidewalk project and hoping to raise funds around Swatara Middle
'Cause
School as well.
Obviously, that's something that it's one thing for this, and now would have to,
I would not anticipate coming back to the well if that's what you're referring
Yeah,
to.
well, this is really unique. I mean, the amount of donations you had, brought into this project. I mean, I know it happens, but doesn't happen on every project.
Really a credit to Mrs. Batdorf and her staff.
Now my wife will see this, or she used to do the signs at Paxtonia, that old message board sign that we have at Paxtonia, and she would probably say, hold off until they get a new sign so the volunteers can maybe have an easier job at that, but I'll take the heat on that.
Let's let the sign for another day. Mr. Stein, if we wish to move this to a vote tonight
But
to commit the.
Yeah. I have another question. I think George does too.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
My question's quick. At one point in time, many years ago, we looked at E.H. Phillips as needing sidewalk from Locust Lane back. I don't know if there was a Walker issue, and there was a time when the street was actually closed to allow walkers. I don't know if that's the case anymore or not, and maybe everybody's bust, but,
I don't know. That's the first I've heard of it. so.
okay. That could be a while ago. That's the one I know of.
And I just had another question for Mr. Wolf. We do have some extra money for this.
It would have to come out of a park improvement. We do have improvements at George Park, so it will be a reallocation, yes.
Okay.
And that's one more. I hate to extend this, but does the district ever look at implementing a program to increase walking traffic? We have really bad as far as that goes. The district spends a lot of money on transportation. Has there ever, not to my knowledge, but do you ever anticipate an effort to increase the amount of walking? I mean, you can see the school from my house on Huntley Drive, and our kids would take a half-hour, 40-minute bus ride, but because the walk is so treacherous, trying to get across Nye Road. Is that anything you guys would consider looking at, or is that just not on the radar right now?
Right now, I can tell you, given the increase in enrollment, the increase in transportation cost, and an increase in cost overall, anything that would reduce transportation cost and improve or increase walkers is something we would definitely like to consider. I'm not aware of any current program or initiative to try and increase walkers to school, but I know that is something that the district would be interested in looking at.
I hope so.
Are most of the kids bused? I mean, do you have many walkers at all, or are most of the kids all
I don't know
bused?
the answer to that. Almost zero. No walkers
By zero,
currently to
okay.
Paxton. And again, the sidewalk project, I don't know, is really, from my standpoint, I can tell you, I'm not looking at getting the sidewalk project done specifically for student transportation or student walkers to and from school. I really see this as an enhancement and a safety enhancement along that Nye Road corridor for current pedestrian traffic that we have. They're exclusive of our student traffic. I think it enhances both the access to George Park and the access to the school, so.
Thank you.
Okay.
That was my point. It's kind of a unique situation where, the agreement committee identified high priority places where sidewalk was missing, and this was the highest priority one we've come up with, and it's also probably one of the highest priorities in the school district as well. So it's an ideal project to work together with, and so that's kind of the unique nature of that.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad that the school district, I'm sorry.
Trying.
It's
I've
workshop.
tried 6
It's
times to
workshop,
move
right? We
it
get to
forward.
talk. I'm glad that the school districts had stepped up, because this came before us before, and it was almost $50,000, and the district wanted us to pay the whole bill, and that's why before that we had said no. So I'm glad that the district finally did, step up with some money.
This gentleman here is primarily the reason.
Okay, I'm done, Loman.
Thank you, Mrs. Lindsay.
I thought Gary was still here, right?
I'm not going there. Mr. Stein, if we wanted to move this forward to a vote tonight, we could do that, but then it would take what additional action?
I think an intergovernmental cooperation agreement, because 2 governments are going to cooperate on a project, and that requires an agreement that has to be adopted by ordinance.
But so we would have to do that. We could do that at next week's meeting? Or would we put that off until March? How busy are you?
Next week would be a little fast, because I have to get some information from Scott.
So we could schedule an agreement for the first meeting in March.
I think so.
Could we vote on doing the projects?
I think you could vote to move forward to get the agreement done, and then that would start the process off.
Okay, so we could approve the township's contribution subject to
an intergovernmental cooperation agreement
being signed.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think the school district would probably, they can't do ordinances, so they'd have to adopt their part by resolution.
Okay. Would somebody like to make a motion to that effect? Was I clear in what we need to do? What we need is we need a motion to approve Lower Paxton Township contributing $17,882 to the project, contingent upon the execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Central Dauphin School District.
I'll make that motion as stated.
So moved by Mr. Judd. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hawk. Do we have any additional questions, Mrs. Lindsay?
I just
I read
approved an
my packet
unfunded
You read your pack. You always do. You do your homework. All in favor then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, there you go. So we'll bring that then, George, onto the agenda for March, first meeting in March. Very good. Thank you both. And thank you to the Greenway Committee and to the Parks and Rec Committee, to Terry, our principal, and everybody for all your hard work on that. It's really good to see that you were able to bring multiple governments and the private sector together to get something done rather than just a government project. So, Mr. Wolf, we still have item 11, a resolution authorizing you to execute documents for PennDOT relative to the Red Top Road Bridge project.
Yes, board members. Previously, the Board of Supervisors has selected 3 engineering firms which it recommended to PennDOT to design the Red Top Road Bridge project. PennDOT is now in the process of developing a contract after a price proposal was submitted for the township's #1 selected firm, which was HRG. However, this process requires municipal execution of documents in PennDOT's ECMS records management system. And as a result, a township official needs to be able to do that. You actually need to be able to log onto the system, and every time I do it, I screw it up, and I call the consulting firm from McCormick Taylor, a consultant, assists me through the process, and it's very convoluted. But the end result is the board has already selected the engineer. The price proposal has been negotiated with the #1 selected engineer, and this project is slated to move forward. The township's overall cost of this project is 5% of the total replacement of the bridge itself, with the state and federal governments paying 95% of the total cost. I'm requesting that the board authorize, basically it would be my going online and affixing my signature to the agreement with HRG by the resolution 18-10.
Any questions? Do we have a motion to approve resolution 18-10?
I'll make a motion, we approve Resolution 2018-10, authorizing the township manager to execute documents in PennDOT ECMS for replacement of the Red Top Road Bridge.
Mrs. Lindsay has moved adoption of resolution 18-10. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hawk. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, ought to know, there's nothing we ought to know this time around. Do we have any improvement guarantees? I don't see any.
There are none.
I'd say there's no improvement guarantees, development agreements, or plan reaffirmations. Do any members of the board, the township manager or solicitor, have any additional comments? May we have a motion then to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
So moved. A second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.